Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy. So, important topics discussion in polity. In last class, we have discussed about the 5th schedule and 6th schedule Panchayat extension to the Scheduled Areas Act 1996. And apart from that, the district autonomous councils, regional autonomous councils, and a special powers given to those councils, and what are the issues in the functioning of those councils. Now similarly, today also we have a very important topic. From this topic you could expect at least one or two questions. So that is India's federal structure and also the center-state relations and various issues between the union government and the state governments. Remember that this is a very important topic for the mains examination. And in fact, so we will understand what does it mean when we say that India is a federal structure. India has a federal structure. India has a federal government. And what is the nature of center-state relations? How powers are distributed between the center and the state governments, and what are the main and major issues between the center and state relations, right? So in recent times you very often hear about the centralization of powers or the centralization tendency that has been seen in recent times. And in fact, Supreme Court also in number of cases, particularly in S.R. Bommai judgment, held that federalism is part of the basic structure doctrine. Now, in this context, we will understand what is a federalism at first and the difference between Indian federalism and federalism that has been followed in other countries, and what type of a federalism that the constitution has envisaged. Because it is said that India is a quasi-federal. India is not a federal in true sense, rather India is a quasi-federal, right? So that means in India the central government or the union government has more powers than the respective state governments. So one example I could give you that the state legislature cannot initiate a constitutional amendment. So constitutional amendment can be initiated by the union parliament only, right? So because of some of those reasons, so it is said that India is a quasi-federal. India is not a federal government in true sense. Now in fact, so Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he actually talked about India's federal structure and the importance of the federalism or a fair center-state relations. So what he said, federalism is no longer a fault line of the center-state relations. So it is no longer a fault line of center-state relations, but a definition of a new partnership of Team India. So this is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi held, stressing on the importance of federalism for the more progress and development of India and achieve the goal of becoming a Vikasit Bharat by the year 2047. Now in this context, we'll try to understand what exactly is federalism. Now federalism is not unique to India, and in fact US has its own federalism. Canada also has a federalism, right? So Indian federalism also borrowed some of its features from the Government of India Act 1935 and also federalism in Canada as well. So federalism, when we say federalism, so federalism is actually a system of government, right? So it is a form of government. And in fact, in a federal government, in a federal system of government, the powers are divided between the central authority and its constituent political units. And here the constituent political units in India are states. So I hope you have understood this, right? So in fact, the seventh schedule of the Indian Constitution, so seventh schedule of the Indian Constitution talks about what? So it talks about three lists: state list, concurrent list, and the union list. For example, it is a constitutionally divided powers between the center, states, and also the concurrent. Okay, so in state list there are some subjects. For example, land is a state subject, law and order is a state subject, police is also a state subject. So state legislature is competent to make laws on the subjects which are mentioned in the state list. And similarly, there is also a union list. So on union list, there are some subjects, for example, communications and defense. Defense. So those are some subjects, railways, upon which only the parliament is competent to make laws. And similarly, in the concurrent list, there are subjects like education is part of the concurrent list, forest is also part of the concurrent list. So those subjects which are mentioned in the concurrent list, both the state legislature and also the union government can actually make laws on subjects which are mentioned in the concurrent list. Right? So however, one thing that you need to understand, in case of a conflict between the state law and union law on any subject which is mentioned in the concurrent list, as per the Supreme Court judgments, the union law shall prevail. Okay, so union law has been given primacy over the state law when it comes to the subjects which are mentioned in the concurrent list. I hope you have understood this. And similarly, there are the residuary powers also, right? So what are these residuary powers? So any subject which is not mentioned in any of these three lists, which is out of the ambit of either state list, concurrent list, or union list, is mentioned in the residuary list. Okay, so these are also known as the residuary powers. However, Parliament has been given powers over the residuary subjects. So only Parliament is the competent authority to make laws on any subject which is mentioned in the residuary matters. So I hope you have understood this, and it is mentioned in the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So that is the division of powers. Right? So here it is said that federalism is a system of government where power is divided between the central government and its constituent political units. And in fact, Indian Constitution through the 7th schedule divided the powers between the center and the state governments. So now it is clear. I hope you have understood what exactly is a federal structure. And in fact, so Indian model of federalism is called as a sui generis model or a unique model of federalism, because Indian model is very often referred to as the quasi-federal model. Indian federalism is known as the quasi-federal model, or it is also known as a sui generis model of federalism. Now, sui generis model of federalism, quasi-federal structure, that essentially means that Indian federalism is a unique federalism of its own kind, right? So it is not similar to the other forms of federalism that we generally see, right? So this quasi-federal or a unique federal structure that has been provided to India by the constitutional framers is because of the conditions that India has been facing. Now, what is the nature of federalism in India? So in India, powers are not distributed equally between the union government and its constituent political units, because we have been facing problems of lack of integrity, or I would say that we have been facing problems like secessionism, radicalism, and insurgent movements. So therefore, at that point of time, even there were demands for states based on the language. So therefore, in order to maintain unity and integrity of the nation, security of the nation, so keeping all those things in mind, the constitutional framers have been provided for this different form of federal structure. So that is a sui generis model of federal structure, where the central government has more powers than the constituent political units. And now we'll understand the difference between Indian federalism and the American federalism, right? So when we talk about the difference between Indian federalism and American federalism, now in fact US federalism is actually the result of agreement among the states, right? So there's an agreement among the states in US, America, and because of that particular agreement, so US federalism exists. But Indian federalism is not about the agreement among the states, but it is it is not just an agreement, but it is just because of the administrative convenience, and for better governance we have multiple states, not because of an agreement. And that's why it is said that American model is indestructible union of indestructible states. Indestructible states. However, with respect to Indian model of federalism, we call it indestructible union of indestructible states, because Article 3 of the Indian Constitution gives powers to Parliament, to form one or more states, to merge the two or more states into a single states, and change the boundaries of the state. And in fact, Article 3, any such changes are not even considered as a constitutional amendment under Article 368. So the ease with which Parliament can actually form new states, merge two or more states, and even change the names of the states. And that is also said that Indian federalism is considered as indestructible union of destructible states. However, Indian federalism is the result of, or the need for more effective administration and governance. For that particular reason, Indian federalism exists. Now in fact, so there are certain features that we could call are the features, they lean towards a strong center. So those features have been indicating that we have a strong center instead of equal powers distributed between the central government and the constituent political units. So that is the exact definition of federalism, but we have a strong center. So there are certain provisions of the Indian Constitution. So those provisions indicate that we have a strong center. Now firstly, division of powers we have just talked about. So this division of powers is mentioned in Article 246 of the Indian Constitution, and it is also provided in the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. As I have already told you that this 7th schedule has provided for 3 different lists: state list, concurrent list, and also union list. And in fact, as I have already told you that under Article 254 of the Indian Constitution, in case of a conflict between the central legislation and the state law on a subject which is mentioned in the concurrent list, the central law shall prevail. Now I'll tell you an example that, for example, imagine that forest is under the concurrent list. In case a particular state, for example, Madhya Pradesh has framed a law on forest, and similarly the union government also framed a law on the forest subject. However, so there is a tussle or a conflict between the law that has been framed by Madhya Pradesh and the union government on the concurrent list subject. So because of this conflict, the primacy has been given to union law. The law framed by the union government shall prevail over the state law. So this also indicates a tendency of strong center, right? So this also indicates a tendency of strong center because the primacy has been given to union law in case of a tussle or a conflict between the state law and the union law. And this has been provided under Article 254 of the Indian Constitution. And secondly, emergency provisions. I hope you knew about this emergency provisions as well, right? So during emergency, the center becomes all powerful. So emergency provisions, particularly Article 356 of the Indian Constitution. So 356 of the Indian Constitution deals with what? It deals with the president's rule in the states. So in case there is a failure of the constitutional machinery in the state, the governor can actually recommend imposition of president's rule under Article 356 of the Indian Constitution. Right? So whenever a president's rule is imposed in a particular state, parliament is empowered to make laws on that particular state, and president takes the responsibility of the administration in the states where the president's rule has been imposed. So the budget is also introduced in the parliament for that particular state. So emergency provisions also indicating that powers are leaned towards the center, or it has indicating a more strong center. And similarly, we also have the national emergency, Article 352 of the Indian Constitution. And in fact, the national emergency can be imposed through war, armed rebellion, and even armed rebellion and external aggression. So whenever such things takes place, the union cabinet can give a written recommendation to the president to impose national emergency. Right? So this is what is called as the national emergency. So national emergency, during national emergency also, so center can actually make law even in the subjects, on the subjects which are mentioned in the state list as well. Right? So therefore emergency provisions also indicating a strong center. And even during national emergency, the center can make laws on any subject which is mentioned in the state list, and that also indicating a strong center. And even during excuse me. So during president's rule in a state, the executive power shifts to the center, right? So it is very, very clear that whenever the president's rule has been imposed under Article 356 of the Indian Constitution, the executive power clearly shifts to the center and parliament assumes the legislative power of the state. I have already explained this to you. And in fact, this provision of Article 356 of the Indian Constitution, particularly Article 356, has been misused by the central government, because governor very often acting as an agent of the central government, and in case of any conflict between the interests of the ruling party at the center and also the opposition ruled states, so there is always a tussle and a conflict. So therefore in this context, governor has been acting as an agent of the central government, agent of the central government, and that has been resulted in misuse of article 356. And misuse of article 356 is very often criticized, and in fact Supreme Court also in number of judgments has talked strongly against the misuse of article 356. And here you could clearly see the federal and unitary features of the Indian constitution, right? Now when we talk about the unitary features, there are some unitary features to the Indian constitution. For example, the emergency provisions we could talk about, right? So they could be the unitary features or unitary provisions, and the all India services can also be considered as a unitary feature. And similarly, the office of governor could also be considered as a unitary feature. So all these different features are unitary features. And similarly, federal features, there are some federal features as well. So what are those federal features? So they indicates that India is a true federal. For example, independent judiciary is a federal feature, and separation of powers or constitutional distribution of powers is also a federal feature. Written constitution, bicameral legislature. So all these are considered as a federal features, and these are unitary features, and they are also important for your prelims examination. And similarly, all India services under article 312 of the Indian constitution. So under article 312 talks about the all India services. So therefore constitution has provided for the all India services like IAS, IPS, and in fact the recruitment has done by the central government, and they work for the state governments. And in fact the role of governor, it is also one of the contested issue when it comes to the center state relations, because article 356 of the Indian constitution is very often misused. And similarly, the bills which are passed by the state legislature are also reserved for the consent of the president, or the governor is not actually giving assent to the bills passed by the state legislature. That we have seen recently. There is a tussle between the governor and the state governments of Kerala, the state governments of West Bengal, and even state governments of Tamil Nadu and Telangana. So that we have seen in recent times, right? So the elected government, the conflict between the elected government and the governor, and apart from that, misuse of article 356 to impose president's rule is also one of the challenge. Okay, so what is the role of governor? We'll try to understand the role of governor. So we knew that governor is a constitutional head. He is a constitutional head at the state level. Okay, so at the state level, and provisions of article 153 talks about the office of governor, right? So it talks about the office of governor, article 153, right? So in fact, governor is appointed by whom? Governor is appointed by the president, and governor is in office during the pleasure of the president as well. And in fact, governor, when he is appointed in a particular state, he enjoys certain discretionary powers. Okay, so discretionary powers. Now what are these discretionary powers? Discretionary powers are those powers which are not mentioned in neither constitution nor any statute. Rather, governor himself has a certain discretionary powers. For example, power to reserve bills for the consideration of president. And apart from that, governor also enjoy another discretionary power, that is called as situational discretion of the governor. For example, in case no party gets a clear majority in after state legislative assembly elections, so it is the responsibility of the governor to call the majority party to form the government, right? So that is also called as a situational discretion, of the president. Okay, so governor. So governor enjoys certain discretionary powers. Now here, one thing that we need to understand, that is, for example, state legislative assembly passed a bill, and a bill to become an act, so it must has to get assent from the governor. So governor must give assent for the bill passed by the state legislative assembly. However, governor has some options before him, such as either withholding his assent to the bill, or sending back the bill for the reconsideration of the state legislative assembly. However, if state legislative assembly pass the bill again, so governor must give his assent to the bill and reserving the bill for the consideration of the president. So if governor thinks so that, for example, the bill passed by the state legislature threatens the position of the high court, or it comes in conflict with the directive principles of state policy, so in that case, governor can actually reserve the bill for the consideration of the president, right? So however, if president can also either give his assent to the bill, withhold his assent to the bill, send the bill for the reconsideration of the state legislature, and if state legislature again pass the bill after president sends it for reconsideration, and the state legislature again send the bill to the president, it is not obligatory on the part of the president to give his assent to the bill, right? So this is not like a governor. And in fact, so apart from that, so critics have been arguing that the role of governor often leads to favor the central government or the ruling party at the center, and that has been undermining the federal structure. So it is not good for the federal structure that we follow in India. So however, we'll try to understand the financial relations between the center and state government. And in fact, the center has a greater control over the financial resources compared to the states, as per Article 268 to 293 of the Indian Constitution, right? So in fact, under Article 280 of the Indian Constitution, Finance Commission has been provided, right? So Finance Commission decides the distribution of tax proceeds between the center and the state governments. And in fact, Parliament also has powers over the states and union territories, as I have already discussed this with you under Article 3 of the Indian Constitution. So Article 3 mentions that Parliament has the power to alter the boundaries of the states, change the names of the states, and create one or more states, or merge one or more states. So that is why it is being said that Indian Union or Indian federalism is called as indestructible union of destructible states. So therefore, this any amendment to the constitution under Article 3, or creation of states, a formation of two or more states, changing their names, changing their boundaries, so it is not even considered as a constitutional amendment under Article 368 of the Indian Constitution. So therefore, ultimately, in conclusion, what you should exactly write? So the features that we have just mentioned, they clearly leans towards the union government. There is no doubt about that. Whatever it is, the governor, emergency provisions, all India services, the distribution of powers under the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, and even the integrated judiciary. So all these indicating that there is these features or the powers are leaning towards a strong center. But Indian Constitution truly wanted to establish cooperative federalism, encouraging both center and states to work together for the national progress. Right? So the GST Council can be said as an example of cooperative federalism. So GST Council has been formed under Article 279A of the Indian Constitution, and GST Council is one of the best example of the cooperative federalism, because in GST Council both center and states have the representation. So that's why we could say that the Constitution has actually envisioned the cooperative federalism, and GST Council is one example of the cooperative federalism. However, so Indian federalism has been facing some challenges, so we look into those challenges as well. So what are the challenges that Indian federalism has been facing? Now, one is the representation in the Rajya Sabha. Now, in fact, when we talk about the representation in Rajya Sabha for the constituent political units in India, so the representation is not same for all the states. For example, UP has more representation compared to smaller states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha. So there is always a criticism of unequal representation for the states in the Rajya Sabha, and that is against the federal spirit also. So therefore, the legal experts have been advocating for equal representation for all the states in the Rajya Sabha, and that is a principle of ideal federalism. Because you know that how Rajya Sabha members are being elected. So Rajya Sabha members are being elected by the already elected members of state legislative assemblies. Since UP is the largest state with a huge population, so there are actually more number of state legislative assembly seats, and because of that reason more number of Rajya Sabha members are elected from the state of UP compared to states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. So however, so providing equal representation for all the states in the Rajya Sabha indicates a principle of ideal federalism, so therefore that has to be enforced. So secondly, emergency provisions have been provided under Article 352 of the Indian Constitution and Article 356 of the Indian Constitution. So emergency provisions have been provided under these different articles, and in fact center has the power to impose president's rule under Article 356 of the Indian Constitution, and central government also has the power to impose national emergency under 352 of the Indian Constitution. However, critics have been arguing that emergency powers have been undermining the state autonomy, because during national emergency also the central government, particularly the parliament, can actually frame laws on any subject which is even mentioned in the state list. And under Article 356 of the Indian Constitution also the president takes over the administration of the state government. So therefore critics have been pointing out that the emergency powers with center undermining the autonomy of the respective state governments, and this actually conflicts with the spirit of federalism. And apart from that, we should also understand the larger role of the governor and the conflict between the elected government and the governor as well, because in recent times we very often see a conflict between the governor and elected governments in the state of Tamil Nadu, in the state of Kerala, in the state of West Bengal as well. So critics, the legal experts have been pointing out the governor has been using for the political interests. Governor is very often acting as a representative of center rather than the constitutional head of the respective state government. So thereby it has been undermining the autonomy of the respective state governments, and it also poses challenges to the autonomy of the state. And in fact, Article 3 of the Indian Constitution, we have already discussed that Parliament has been given unlimited powers with respect to the creation of new states, altering the boundaries of existing states, changing the names of the states, and also creation of one or more states by merging them. So therefore, Parliament has been given unlimited powers under Article 3 of the Indian Constitution. So any state can be formed with the simple majority in the Parliament, and in fact, the formation of a state is not even considered as a constitutional amendment under Article 368 of the Indian Constitution. So that clearly indicates the dominance of the central government, and along with the central dominance, we could also say that a central government has been undermining the federal spirit federal spirit. And in fact, all India services are also undermining the autonomy of the respective state governments, because the all India services like Indian Administrative Service, Indian Police Service, they also present challenges to the executive powers of respective states despite offering the administrative uniformity. And even the integrated machinery and autonomy is also another major issue, right? So when we talk about integrated machinery, so we have an integrated election machinery. So through the Election Commission of India under Article 324 of the Indian Constitution, and Comptroller and Auditor General of India under Article 148 of the Indian Constitution, right? And even the veto over the state bills which are being passed by the state legislative assembly. So all these things illustrate the tensions between the central and the state governments. So remember that a comptroller and auditor general can also audit the accounts of the state governments, and the Election Commission of India also conduct elections to the state legislative assemblies and state legislative councils as well in the respective states. So therefore, there is an apprehension that these provisions have been undermining the autonomy that has been provided to these state governments under the federal setup, and this clearly indicates the dominance of the central government. And there are some recent developments. So with respect to the center-state relations and the federal structure of the Indian Constitution, we'll try to understand what are those recent developments in this context. In recent times, cooperative federalism has been excessively emphasized, and even the central government and the respective state governments are also very proactively emphasizing on the need for the cooperative federalism, and that is very important for the progress and development of the nation as a whole. Now, cooperative federalism essentially builds on collaborative relationship, right? So it essentially builds on collaborative relationship between the central and state governments, where the both levels of government, they work together in the decision making process, and they also share the responsibilities for the nationwide development or the responsibilities for national development. So that is what is known as cooperative federalism. And one example of cooperative federalism, you could mention the GST Council, where the state governments are also provided the fair representation, right? So fair representation, you could not see the dominance of the central government in the GST Council. So that indicates a fair representation of the respective state governments. And in fact, in recent times, as I have already told you, that the cooperative federalism has been increasingly emphasized, and it has emerged as a mode of center-state relations, as it has been focusing on mutual cooperation, consensus building, etc. And in fact, the interstate disputes is also another major problem, right? So what is the nature of the interstate disputes? For example, we very often see the interstate river water disputes, and we also see the interstate land disputes, land boundary disputes. So for example, the land boundary disputes that we have seen in Northeast, particularly the states of Assam and Mizoram, right? So we have seen those land boundary disputes, and we also see the interstate river water disputes, for example between Kerala and Tamil Nadu about the Periyar river, right? So Mulla Periyar, or we could say that this Mulla Periyar dam, and between Tamil Nadu and Karnataka about the Kaveri river, So we have seen the interstate river water disputes between the states, and also interstate land boundary disputes among these different states. So this is also one of the major problem that has been undermining the federal structure, and also the competitive federalism or cooperative federalism. See, when we talk about the cooperative federalism, so it not only means a cooperation between or collaboration between the union government and respective state government, but it also means the collaboration between the states, collaboration between different states as well. So that also comes under the federal structure or cooperative federalism. And apart from that, recently we have also seen a controversy about national population register in states like Assam. So not just in states like Assam, and the center has planned to brought in the national population register in other states also. Other states are opposing this national population register. And similarly, the Citizenship Amendment Act, so this is also a bone of contention between the center and state governments, right? So these are some recent developments between the center and state relations with respect to the federalism. Now, what are the drawbacks of the existing federal structure? So it is important for us to understand the drawbacks in the existing federal structure. So firstly, one major issue or one major drawback between the center state relations is that there is an imbalance in the distribution of the financial resources. So this is one of the major issue, because the central government has a greater share of financial resources compared to states. So as I have already told you, under Article 280 of the Indian Constitution, President appoints Finance Commission every 5 years. President appoints Finance Commission every 5 years, and the function of the Finance Commission is to distribute the tax proceeds between the center and the state governments. However, the central government has a greater share of financial resources compared to the states. Here, states have more responsibilities. When I say the administrative responsibilities in terms of governance, economic development. So state governments have more responsibilities with less resources. They have less resources. But here, the central government has less responsibilities with respect to governance, administration, but it has more resources, and that is a bone of contention, or that is an issue of conflict between the center and state government, because the central government has a more share in resources. And in fact, central government also imposes cess and surcharge, and both cess and surcharge is not subjected to the divisible pool of between the center and state governments. So thereby it has been creating a fiscal imbalance between the center and state governments, right? So I would say that the imbalance in fiscal federalism. So there is a huge imbalance in the fiscal federalism. So that is one of the concern. And apart from that, there are also there's also overlapping jurisdiction. So overlapping jurisdiction in the sense that, as I have already told you, that the concurrent subjects which are mentioned in the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So any subject which is mentioned in the concurrent list, both center and state governments can actually frame laws, right? So there is an overlapping jurisdiction, such as, for example, education is mentioned in the concurrent list, forests are also mentioned in the concurrent list. So this very often leads to the overlapping jurisdiction between the center and the state governments, and that is also creating a conflict between the center and state governments. And in fact, centralized planning for the development and growth is also another major issue, because a centralized planning very often neglected regional issues, right? So for example, there are states where there are issues, but those issues are being neglected. For example, Marathwada, Marathwada and Vidarbha in the state of Maharashtra. So in the state of Maharashtra, these regions are considered as a drought-prone regions. And Bundelkhand region in the Madhya Pradesh and UP areas is considered as a relatively a backward region. So it is considered as a relatively backward region. And in fact, Rayalaseema and northern Andhra Pradesh are also considered as a backward regions. But centralized planning very often neglecting the regional issues within these states. And that is also one of the issue between the center and state relations, because they have a specific needs specific to these particular regions, and that has been hampering the development in these regions. So centralized planning has been neglecting these areas. Now whenever you mention about all these things, please try to write the examples as well. And even politicization of the existing issues is also another major concern. For example, the issue of interstate river disputes is highly politicized issue in India, and that is why it very often becomes difficult to find out a mutually acceptable solution for the interstate river water disputes in India. Not just the river water disputes, but there are a number of issues which are highly politicized, right? So because of high politicization of these issues, it actually impedes cooperation, and it also adversely affecting the policy implementation as well. So however, a strong and responsive federal system is important, and it is essential for maintaining political stability and also ensuring the vibrant democracy, right? So therefore, we should always support a strong and representative federal system, which is essential for maintaining political stability and also the vibrant democracy. And similarly, we should talk about the cooperative federalism and the competitive federalism. Now, what exactly a cooperative federalism and what exactly a competitive federalism? So in recent times, it has been excessively emphasized upon, right? So in fact, Indian federal system is designed to facilitate cooperation between the central government and also the constituent political units. So cooperation in number of areas is very, very important. So therefore, the center and state governments could overcome the issues which are considered as the key concern for both center and state governments, right? So they work together. For example, the goods and services tax reform is considered as one of the prime example of the cooperative federalism, right? So it is considered as a prime example of cooperative federalism, because where center and state governments have been provided a fair representation, and in fact both center and state governments, they come together, they pooled their resources to create a unified tax system, And similarly, competition or confrontation or competitive federalism. Now, competitive federalism actually encourages states to improve their performance and their policies compared to the other states. For example, there's always a competitive federal spirit when it comes to attracting more and more investments. For example, between the state of Rajasthan, between the state of Gujarat, between the state of Madhya Pradesh, and between the state of UP. So competitive federalism essentially ensures that there is a competition for attracting investments, there is a competition for improving their performance, improving their policies. And in recent times we have also seen a competition for attracting investors into the states of Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu. So we also heard that the states are literally poaching the investors into their respective states. So this could be an example of the competitive federalism, so that they are eager to improve their performance, their policies, and they wanted to attract more investment, more business and resources as well. The best example that you could mention here, the ease of doing business ranking. The ease of doing business ranking in these respective states. So they actually create a healthy competition among states to improve their business environments. Right? So what does confrontation between the center and states actually means? So despite the cooperative and competitive spirit of federalism, so there are also confrontations in the Indian federal setup. So the confrontation between the center and states. Now when I say confrontation, the best example is about GST compensation. So GST compensation, so this is an issue between both center and state governments. So this is an example of the confrontation between the center and state governments. And apart from that, the other major example is the conflict between the central government and the state government of West Bengal over the CBI's jurisdiction. Right? So over the CBI's jurisdiction, and even West Bengal government withdrawn the general consent for the Central Bureau of Investigation. So that is an issue of the confrontation between the center and the state governments. And apart from that, you could also mention the other example, that the confrontation between the elected government of Delhi and the lieutenant governor of Delhi, or even the government of Delhi and the union government. So these are the examples of confrontation between the center and the state governments. Right? So apart from that, we need to talk about the issue of asymmetric federalism. Now what exactly is asymmetric federalism? So asymmetric federalism is also seen in news in recent times. Now asymmetric federalism generally means, so it is also a federal setup, but the constituent political units where the states in India have unequal powers. So that is also another major problem. Right? So it is being said that whenever you have a federal form of government, the constituent political units, they are states. So states should have equal powers. But rather, asymmetric federalism is also seen in India, where different states have different powers with respect to the political, administrative, and even the fiscal domains, and that is what is called as the asymmetric federalism. For example, the example of asymmetric federalism is some states are enjoying the special category status while other states don't have the special category status, and some states would get central funding in the ratio of 90-10. For example, if if central government announces any central sector scheme, the funding pattern would be 90% of the funding would be given by the center, and 10% of the spending on that particular program is borne by the respective state governments. However, so this is not the case for all the states. So some states it is 60-40. for the same central sector scheme, 60% of the funding would be given by the center and 40% of the funding would be given for the would be borne by the respective state government. So this is what is called as fiscal federalism. Sorry, this is what is called as asymmetric federalism. Right? So what is this asymmetric federalism? So asymmetric federalism means the unequal powers given to different states, and that is what is called as asymmetric federalism. However, this asymmetric federalism can be viewed both vertically, right? So both vertically as well as horizontally. So horizontal asymmetric federalism and vertical asymmetric federalism. So what is this vertical asymmetric federalism? So it is between the center and states. Center and states. So it is between the states. It is between the states. So this is what is called as horizontal federalism, and this is called as vertical federalism. Right? So what is the need for asymmetric federalism in India? So we should also understand this. What is the need for asymmetric federalism? So in fact, protecting ethnicity and culture is one of the reason for asymmetric federalism in India. Right? So in fact, it has been mentioned in Article 371 of the Indian Constitution, and Article 371 talks about different states and special provisions for those states. Right? So it actually provides a special powers for northeastern states and safeguarding their customs, the laws, religions, and also the social traditional practices. Right? So protecting ethnicity and culture is one important reason for asymmetric federalism in India. And apart from that, consolidating social fabric is also another important reason for providing asymmetric federalism. For example, granting special powers, semi-autonomy for regions, strengthening the feeling of empowerment, and also curtailing the secessionist and separatist tendencies in India. So secessionist and separatist tendencies are also another major issue in India, and it is very important that we should, for example, in Northeast, insurgent movement. So insurgent movements. So examples, National Socialist Council of Nagaland, IM, is an example, and United Liberation Front of Assam. So these are some secessionist groups, insurgent groups. So in this context, it is very important that the feeling of disaffection among the people who are living in these respective states should be dealt by providing them more autonomy. For example, 5th schedule or 6th schedule areas in the Indian Constitution, providing them more and more autonomy. So that could actually strengthens the feeling of empowerment among them, and it also curtails the secessionist and separatist tendencies among the people, and even strengthening democracy and representation, because asymmetric federalism ensures representation of minority areas, thereby reinforcing democracy as well. And in fact, promoting unity in diversity. Unity in diversity is also another major aspect of providing more powers to certain states, because asymmetric federalism would uphold the concept of unity in diversity by protecting the vulnerable groups through the special powers. So these are some important reasons for providing asymmetric federalism. However, apart from that, asymmetric federalism would also ensure social justice as well. For example, special status or special category status provisions for certain states. For example, the states of Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, states in Northeast, so they enjoy special status or special category status, so that aimed at the all-round or inclusive development of those states, along with the social justice and reducing radicalization because radicalization may pose threat to the internal security, unity and integrity of the nation. So therefore, special powers are actually granted to help reduce radicalization and also bring people into the mainstream of state-led development. So you could mention about the policies or schemes or constitutional provisions with respect to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And what are the challenges of asymmetric federalism in India? So it is important for us to understand the challenges as well. We have just understood the importance of asymmetric federalism, but it also poses some challenges as well. So challenges include the center state conflicts is a one challenge because of the asymmetric federalism, because now you could see that states like Odisha, Bihar and even for that matter Andhra Pradesh have been demanding a special category status should be given to them so that they could actually attract more and more investments, and that would create a gainful employment opportunities for the youth in those respective states, and they could also achieve the higher levels of growth. However, the central government is reluctant to provide them the special category status because that could fuel more states demanding the special category status. So this is also a cause of concern between the center-state relations. And even the allegations of partisanship, that is also because some states have been making allegations on the central government that central government is showing a biasness and central government is showing the partisanship to some states which are being ruled by the same government at the center, right? So therefore the same political party at the center. So there have been allegations of discriminatory practices as it has been witnessed in the case of southern states and the 15th Finance Commission, right? So in fact southern states are very often alleging that whatever they are contributing, so they are not getting that much huge revenue from the center. So that is also a major cause of concern. And in fact arbitrariness, so arbitrariness in the sense that the discrimination between units can lead to the problems. For instance, the questions have been raised about the absence of special category status for states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, and in fact despite backward, despite poor, suffering with problems like poverty, lack of infrastructure, a sizable chunk of tribal population, and absence of productive infrastructure, states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh have not given the special category status. So therefore it has also been indicating the arbitrariness on the part of the union government. And in fact lack of quantifiable criteria is also another major cause of concern, right? So because often preferential treatment has been given to certain units which are politically motivated rather than the need based, right? So in this context we'll try to understand the center state relationship in a much more detailed manner and the relevant constitutional provisions as well. And in fact, so we have just understood that India is a federal government. We have a federal government, and so it operates on the principle on distribution of powers between the center and states under the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So 7th schedule has provided for 3 lists, and 7th schedule distributes the powers between the center and the states governments. And this relationship between the center and state governments is essential for India's stability, security, and also the economic development as well. Now, what are the constitutional provisions? So that specifically talks about the center-state relationship. For example, the legislative relations between the center and states dealt with Article 245 and 255 of the Indian Constitution, right? So Article 245 to Article 255 of the Indian Constitution deals with the legislative relations, right? So it deals with the legislative relations. And in fact, the Constitution has divided the legislative authority into 3 lists. So what are those 3 lists? The union list, concurrent list, and also the state list. So here the union list consisting of 100 subjects, and the state list consisting of 61 subjects, and the concurrent list consisting of 52 subjects, right? 52 subjects. So this these provisions deals with the legislative relations and administrative relations. Article 256 to 263 deals with the administrative relations between the center and the state governments. So union and state governments exercise administrative jurisdiction of or over the subjects which are mentioned in the union list and state list respectively, right? So similarly, financial relations dealt with Article 268 to 293 of the Indian Constitution, right? So this actually provides for provisions for financial relations or existing financial relations with a finance commission that is being set up by the president under Article 280 of the Indian Constitution every 5 years regarding the distribution of the financial resources between the center and the state governments. Now in this context, we'll try to understand the historical evolution of center-state relations. Now in phase 1, that is being between 1950 to 1961, it is being dominated by the central government, right? So this is also known as the one party dominant system, where the Congress party was a ruling party at the center and even most of the states. And in fact, this particular phase is characterized by the consultation between the center and states, accommodation, and also the consensus building as well. So this is called as a age of healthy federalism, and this is also a phase of a one party dominant system. And similarly, phase 2 of the Indian Constitution from from 1967 to 1977. So this phase is marked by a period of centralization tendencies and even misuse of Article 356 of the Indian Constitution. So 356 talks about the president's rule, right? So president's rule has been very often misused by the central government for its advantage. And the third phase is between 1977 to 1989. So this period has witnessed the period of a coalition politics. So we could say that this is a period of coalition politics, and there is also an increased demand for autonomy and the political decentralization as well. And phase 4 also starts from 1989 onwards, and this is also an advent of coalition government at the center, and it has furthered the federalism process, regional parties playing a decisive role as well during the phase 4. And we need to talk about the contemporary center-state relations. Now the contemporary center-state relations, so as we have already discussed, that there is an increased emphasis on cooperative and competitive federalism between the states and also between the center and state government. So the principle underscores the need for center states to work for the partnership to achieve their common goals. So the examples include implementation of goods and services tax and role of Niti Aayog in promoting the bottom-up approach to the developmental planning, right? So competitive federalism. So when we talk about the competitive federalism, so in competitive federalism also, the respective state governments actually benefit, they actually compete for the benefits among themselves with the central government. So they aiming to improve the administrative performance and also the growth activities as well. So examples of competitive federalism: ease of doing business and states competing with one another for attracting investments, and so other different things can be considered part of the competitive federalism. And competitive federalism will also benefit the states because they compete with one another for the welfare, development, policy framing, policy implementation, better governance, right? That would result in overall improvement in the development and progress of these states. However, there are certain irritants between the center-state relations. What are those current irritants, right? For example, misuse of Article 356, President's Rule, that we have discussed, and the discriminatory appointment and removal of the governors. So discriminatory appointment in the sense that, for example, governors are appointed without without consulting the chief minister, and governors are appointed solely by the central government, right? So those people who are having political background are also being appointed as governors of the states. And for example, if the government at the center changes, the governors who are appointed by the previous government are removed by the central government. So this is an arbitrary and discriminatory removal of governors. And allocation of financial resources under Article 280 of the Indian Constitution, and even management of all India services. So we could say that Article 268 to Article 293. So allocation of financial resources, both vertical devolution as well as horizontal devolution, vertical and horizontal devolution, and management of the all India services. This is also a major issue between the center and state relations, and encroachment of center on state subjects mentioned in the state list during President's Rule, or not just President's Rule, in normal cases also the Parliament has been encroaching upon the state subjects as well. Asymmetric federalism that we have just discussed, because of a unique needs of different states, it has been provided for the asymmetric federalism, where the particular states are treated more favorably by the center in terms of financial resources. And power of the center to form or destroy states under Article 3 of the Indian Constitution. And recent issues related to the implementation of national education policy, particularly between the state of Tamil Nadu and the union government, and Citizenship Amendment Act and other such central laws. For example, farm laws also. Later the central government has withdrawn these farm laws. So however, the center-state relationship in India is marked by a continuous dialogue and respect for the constitutional provisions. And apart from that, it also marked by understanding the shared responsibilities between the center and state governments. However, in the end, the endeavor is to foster healthy, cooperative and competitive federalism that actually upholds the spirit of constitution and also meet the aspirations of its diverse citizens. So that is the essence of cooperative and competitive federalism that is actually envisioned by the constitutional framers, and that is also very important to achieve the goal of Viksit Bharat by the year 2047. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you.